But I think what I've come to learn is that the process is the success. You know what I mean? It's not when you get to the destination. It's the stuff that happens in between.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode. My name is Kevin O and this is Monday Arvo podcast.
I sat down with Tim Talam from Game Farm. He shares his definition of success, dreams, and the vision that he has within Game Farm, and the most importantly, the process to achieve them. For those people who are not familiar with Game Farm, the Game Farm brand is respected as representing the highest standards of quality control from farm gate to plate. The compelling story behind Game Farm tells a tale of tribulation, commitment, success, and undeniable passion for game passed between generations and shaping the Australian narrative of game bird farming. Alright everyone, grab a coffee or tea and get ready for a chat this Monday Arvo.
How are you, Tim?
Kevy, I'm really well, mate. It's nice to see you. Nice to have you back in the country.
Thank you for being on the show. It was a bit of a hustle to get this started today. But I want to start with asking you, as far as I know, you studied media arts at uni, but how and what was the connection between you and the food?
I guess when I was growing up, I didn't really know what I wanted to do outside of high school. Actually, funnily enough, straight out of high school, I went straight into engineering. And I didn't like it. So I took some time off, probably ended up being about 3 odd years, just worked a little bit. And then I decided, okay, I should probably do something with my life. What do I like to do? What could I see as a career? And at that point in my life, I guess really kind of had an affinity with film and video. So I was like, okay, let's learn about it. Let's study it and see what could come of it. Maybe something can, maybe something might not. But at the same time, I'll put my energy into that and see what happens.
And how did you get into sort of cooking?
Yes, cooking. So cooking has probably been one of those things that's always kind of resonated with me. I suppose, growing up in a Filipino household, it's something that, you're always surrounded by. And I think I always kind of subjectively knew that I would have a place in food. I just didn't really know when I was young what that would look like. And so I suppose after I'd done my uni degree, I was like, okay, that's done now. What do I do next? But at that time, I felt like I had a sense of purpose in the food industry. And at that point, I had just really started getting to an American-style barbecue. Back then, this is going back to 2010, there was nothing on the circuit. I literally was watching television shows, wanting to learn about it. How could I do that? Because there was not much that was available. So all I could really do was just learn based on physically doing it. So I got a little American-style smoker and then just trials and tribulations, It'd be like a Friday night, a Saturday night, you light the barbecue at midnight so that it's ready for lunch. All those kind of crazy things where you didn't really know what you were doing, but I suppose at the same time that was half the fun because, obviously you'd learn and you'd grow. Obviously it wasn't great in the beginning because you're testing everything and you're learning as you go. But once you start to, see some success and you produce some delicious stuff, it's like, okay, this is pretty cool.
What was the first failure that you remember and then first dish that you were happy with?
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess as a failure, I suppose, hard to actually really remember, to be honest, because I guess my sister will probably tell you better than me because I always used to get angry and she would just be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? But from, I guess, an American barbecue perspective, I probably burnt a lot of stuff because I guess fundamentally understanding that it's a slow process, cooking over a very long period of time at a very low temperature is kind of the way to do it, as opposed to going hot and fast where the end result, is burnt.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, there've been some, obviously some failures and some wins along the way, but it's been incredibly fun to learn.
Was there any dish that you were really stoked to manage to nail it?
I guess for me, because American style barbecue was born out of my kind of desire to eat slow cooked meats. So one of the dishes or one of the cuts that I suppose that I really, really had so much time for back in the day were beef short ribs. Cooking them low and slow for 6 to 8 hours. When you get them right, it's so delicious. It's like out of this world how good it could possibly become. And you wouldn't even think that. But when you're there, when you're in front of your barbecue and it smells like barbecue and it's like 4 a.m. in the morning, you don't know what life is happening. But I think those experiences definitely add to the taste because it's so satisfying when you bite into it and it's just super unctuous and super delicious. And you've literally given a part of yourself to that short rib. Yeah, I would say probably beef short ribs are my go-to.
Any side dishes that you created with it?
Yes. So I really loved the idea of cooking not just meat in the barbecue. So I had to play around with cooking different things. Vegetables were definitely one of them. One of the things that I really, really loved to do was because an American style barbecue has trays and has racks essentially. So what I would do is I would put the meat on top, but then I would put the vegetables on the bottom so that the drippings would go onto the veggies. The one that I really, really loved was literally sitting half a head of a cabbage under it. The fat drips into it and it's ridiculous. And then that cooks off and then serve that literally very simply with some vinacotto and some roasted hazelnuts. That, for me, that's game.
Wow. Do you still want to open one, the American food truck?
I would love to open American style food truck. I actually put that as a goal for myself. Yeah, right. One day, because it's primarily going to be a passion project, I want to be able to, achieve things in my life where I get to a point where I'm going to open this food truck, not as a means for profit or for money. That'll literally just be something that I want to do because I want to do it. And that's obviously where you start to think about what are the steps that are necessary to achieve that. And I don't obviously see that happening anytime soon. But my goal is to one day be comfortable enough to have that truck and do what I want. And that's it.
Where would you go first with the truck?
I don't know where I'd sell it. I suppose I would just allow it to sell itself. So it'd be quite a mobile thing, so you could go wherever you needed to go. But ultimately, the product will sell itself.
You just want to do it.
That's it.
Right. Then you worked at Victor Churchill back in 2014. Was that your first handling meat?
Yeah, so I suppose Victor Churchill, one of the most renowned butcher shops in Australia and, potentially the globe as well. At that particular point in my life, touching on from my desire to have an American barbecue food truck, I came to a point where I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to learn about it. Now, I didn't have any hospo training. I didn't have any training of that kind of caliber. I think for me, my main decision to start at Victor Churchill was primarily to learn about meat, spend maybe 6 months there, and then take the skills that I had learned and then apply it to the food truck. And, what was it, like 3 years later, I obviously stayed. I learnt a lot about the meat industry, a lot about meat and how to cook different cuts. Because my barbecue food truck, I wanted it to be a truck that didn't serve the traditional brisket, short ribs, pork ribs, all that kind of stuff. So I went to Victor Churchill to kind of learn about what else I could cook and how I could kind of separate myself from the pack.
Did you work as a butcher?
No, I didn't work as a butcher there at all. I honestly just worked on the floor. They had a slicing section which would cook chickens on a rotisserie. So I eventually kind of championed that section, but no, didn't spend any time in the butchery outside of, learning techniques from the butchers that were there and, maybe doing a couple of shifts, but nothing super solid in the butchery.
You said you stayed there for 3 years. What sort of sections did you work in that time?
So whilst I was at Victor Churchill, I predominantly ran what they know as the slicing section. So that particular section is one of the sections that I guess is more so the ready-to-eat cooked section. They do roast chickens, they do roast porks, they do burgers and sandwiches. So that's kind of where I felt more of an inclination to do, as opposed to just work the floor, simply because I could learn about food, I could learn about preparation and handling and those kind of things. And yeah, that's essentially where I spent most of my time.
I haven't personally met Darren, but I spoke to Darren so many times over the phone. Did you meet Darren there?
The great Darren O'Rourke, yes, absolutely. Absolutely met Darren at Victor Churchill. He's an incredible human being, and he's someone that I absolutely have learnt a lot from, not just from, a technical stance and a technical perspective, but more so just from one's ability to do things that are outside of the norm. So he just taught me so many different ways to cut things, to prepare things, and it kind of just really inspired my imagination in a way to, take what I learned from him and try to apply it to different cuts of meat, different styles of cooking. Because Darren, he's actually a chef by trade. So he had that experience and that, I guess, knowledge of what people wanted to cook and how they wanted to cook. And so he was able to kind of level up that perspective where he would offer things that you wouldn't really find at a normal butcher shop.
Yeah, I see a lot of stuff that he puts up on his Instagram. His cooking is so great. Is there any episodes that you want to share with Darren? Something like memorable?
There's a lot that I think Darren's taught me. And I think one of the things that has really kind of stuck, something that I actually really always wanted to learn, was how to do a butcher's knot. So that's one of the things that, if you look at it, it looks incredibly intricate and incredibly difficult to do. And admittedly, in the beginning it is. But like with everything, as you practice, you learn the process and it becomes easier over time. So that's one of the things that I kind of really learnt at the onset of me starting there. I would often find myself, when the shop wasn't terribly busy or the floor was obviously already occupied by staff, I'd find myself trickling over into the butcher's room, kind of asking Darren questions after question. And yeah, from there, I think he was like, okay, who's this kid and why is he asking me so many questions? He must want to know some stuff. So he was kind enough to share his knowledge, and that's, I think, one of the greatest things about him is that he just has every second of every day for people. Right. And so he gave me a lot of his time, and obviously super grateful for that because, yeah, I learnt a lot from him.
So you were dreaming about your American food truck, trying quite a few things at home, doing barbecues and stuff. Now you worked at Victor Churchill. Have you ever thought of working as a chef?
Have I ever thought of working as a chef? That's a very, very good question. The answer is yes. I absolutely did think about working as a chef. I guess I kind of really wanted to see what that world would look like, because naturally, for someone that loves food and loves cooking, the next step of that phase is to see if you can take it professionally. And obviously over the experiences that I've had, I've been able to kind of identify, is that where my place was? And the answer that I've learned is that it is no. I love food, I love cooking, but the idea of me chefing just wasn't something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Interesting. What made you think that?
Cooking has always been something incredibly personal for me. And when I'm in the kitchen, I'm in my zone and I'm doing my things and I'm learning at the same time. And I think after having worked in kitchens, I found that I was cooking other people's food, which was, absolutely a dream because I was able to learn. But to sustain that day in, day out, I felt would have affected the way that I look at food and the way that I appreciate food. Because I'm a bit of a food geek, right? And I, like you and I have spoken about food a lot. Yeah. And so for me, I didn't ever want to become resentful towards food. And so I want it to be my thing and I want to cook my food, do it the way I want. because that's what I enjoy.
You wanted to protect that love of food, right? I cannot skip talking about the MasterChef. How did the MasterChef come in your life?
The old MasterChef chestnut. It's honestly, Kevy, it's one of those things that I guess I had always really kind of watched from the very beginning. And I thought to myself, I could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could do that. Ironically, when it first started, I did audition and I didn't actually make it through.
Which year?
Oh, this is going from like maybe the second year.
Right.
Yeah, at that point I was just really obsessed with food and I was like, okay, I could probably do something here. But then obviously time had passed and it's still something that I really wanted to do, but you know, it was a question of when. I suppose for me, when I went onto it, I was at a point in my life where I felt I was ready to do so. So at that point as well, I felt that I had, this was right after I'd finished working at Victor Churchill. And I figured, okay, I'm ready to take the next step in terms of potentially taking this professionally. But at the same time, I still have this itch to scratch of MasterChef. There's no better time to really do it than now. So I did, gave it a red hot crack, and I had the most amazing experience.
When you said you thought you are ready to do it, does that mean you thought you could win it?
That's funny. I think I don't necessarily think that I was there to win it. I mean, obviously that would have been amazing, but for me, I wanted more so to endure the experiences because I'd obviously watch the show and I'd see the kind of things they would do, you know, the pressure tests, the service challenges, and I just felt like it was that kind of world that I would just be so happy to be a part of. Like they cooked, they learnt, and you could see their progression. And for me, I think that was the most important part about it was knowing that you'd start at point A, but you wouldn't finish at point A. Whether you made the top 20, the top 10, whether you won, you would progress quite extensively along that kind of process. So I think that's what really stood out to me was more so a personal challenge to myself to see how I would fare under those conditions and see what I could learn and how I could also become a better person.
When you were watching the show and then when you're actually in the show, was there any difference between those two?
The most common question I get asked,
Right.
well, two. First one, is the food cold? Yes, the food is cold. It absolutely is cold. What happens throughout the process is the judges go around to the benches and they taste elements of the dish. So they have an idea as to what the end result will be. Second question I get asked a lot, the clock. Is it real? It's bloody real. It's absolutely real. When you get 75 minutes on that clock, you honestly only have 75 minutes on that clock.
Right.
There's nothing you can do about it. If you're not finished, tough.
How far did you go?
So I didn't make it as far as I wanted to. I made the top 20 and I unfortunately went out on a dessert, which wasn't my strong suit, very much a savoury cook, and I just didn't do as well as I thought I would have liked to in that particular challenge, but yes, I made top 20.
You said you were out on the dessert part. What was the test? What was the mission?
So that was during Nigella week, Nigella Lawson. So she came around for that particular week, and that elimination challenge was a two-step challenge. It was a taste test, and then the second phase was cook a dish based on the ingredients that were part of the original dish. So, for example, the dish was actually a trifle. You essentially needed to identify all of the ingredients in it, and the persons with the lowest correctly identified ingredients would go then to the next round. I was obviously part of that group, and the next challenge was to cook a dish with those ingredients. So already being a dessert challenge, I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. At that point, I think I kind of understood the three different elements that I did. So the dish that I tried to do was a bomb Alaska, and I understood the components that were a part of it, but it was just a game of, will it set in time? Will it go as planned? And the answer to that question, spoiler alert, is no. It did not go as planned. But that's just part of the process.
How was cooking in front of the camera?
Cooking in front of the cameras, ironically, you kind of don't pay much attention to it. Outside of the fact that the story producers would come and ask you questions, you just wouldn't have time to look at them and engage. You'd still answer the questions, but you wouldn't stop and have a conversation with them. You'd still need to do what you were doing, and by that time, you just kind of understood the process and it just became a part of it. So it wasn't difficult, wasn't challenging. Again, just part of the process.
After the show, did anyone recognize you?
It's a very powerful show, that MasterChef. Yes, I got recognised. Sometimes still to this day I get recognised, which is very random because it's been a very solid 6 years since I was on there. But the strange feeling of someone that you don't know coming up to you, knowing who you are, and asking for a photo. Very interesting experience.
Right.
I suppose that's what happens, when you're subject to that. You're on telly, you become a face. I ran with it.
Yeah.
It was fun.
What's after MasterChef?
Yes. So the very important thing that I was able to determine, and actually one of the biggest reasons as to why I wanted to go on MasterChef, was for me to kind of understand if I wanted to be a chef or not, ultimately. So I went on there. Off the back of that, I did stages in a couple of restaurants, which is kind of where I became aware of the fact that I didn't want to become a chef. Because like I said, working as a chef in theory is an incredible thing. But when you do it, there are so many challenges that are involved there. And obviously the biggest one for me was I didn't ever want to resent food. So I decided, okay, that's fine. You got the answer that you want. But I still wanted to stay in the food space. I knew then that chefing isn't the place that I needed to be. So then I explored the producer perspective and reached out back to my contacts at Victor Churchill and tried to understand where that could take me. So I ended up working at Vic's Meat, who supplies obviously a lot of restaurants around Sydney. And I was able to kind of still have those relationships with chefs and still be able to learn from them, cooking-wise, without obviously losing that connection that I had with food.
Were you also interested in seafood as well?
Yes, yeah, I guess I didn't really have as big of an affinity with other proteins as I do with red meat. I guess for me, obviously having the aspirations to open up an American barbecue food truck, it always kind of stemmed back to that and essentially the kind of things that I like to eat. For me, I've just always really enjoyed eating slow-cooked meat. And so that's kind of the niche that I found. And funnily enough, when I was on MasterChef, I became known as the meat guy. So in that kind of respect, it painted the picture. And since then, I've invested time in understanding what that means to learn about meat, what it means to cook meat, what it means to be able to work with incredible producers, and always going to be incredibly grateful for the fact that I was able to kind of come to that realization.
You mentioned that you worked at Vic's. What was your role there?
When I was at Vic's, the main kind of role that I had actually started off originally more so from a customer service role. I would be the guy that would answer the phone when you call, but then progressed to more so of a account manager role where I would, speak with the restaurants, speak with the chefs, kind of allow them to plan menus based on the availability, try to facilitate things if they needed something special. You know what it's like working with reps, Kev. That's exactly, effectively what I was. Just trying to essentially provide them with the produce.
Then when you first start as a customer service role, obviously you wouldn't get a job there to be doing customer service. Did you share your dreams, or did you tell them your goals? Like, did you tell them that like later on you want to be doing certain thing in Vix?
Yeah, I think they were very aware. I think obviously at that point as well, post the show, I was in that kind of mindset where I wanted to be in hospo. I really wanted to be a part of that kind of industry. And so being a part of that company, I guess, was kind of an easy translation for me, obviously having that experience with Victor Churchill and allowing me to, expose myself to the whole industry from a food service perspective. Because obviously working in retail is a different environment to working with food service and restaurants and that sort of thing. So I was able to, reach out to chefs, meet new chefs, create relationships, and again, continue that process of learning and growing.
Let's talk about your journey at Game Farm. How did it all start?
Yeah, it honestly started off the back of something that I had actually produced. So during that COVID period, I kind of reflected on what was important to me because, restaurants had closed and I'd left Vix at that time. And I was like, okay, what is important to me? And at that point, I was really, really taken aback by producers and understanding what they do and how they do it, and more importantly, why they do it. And something that's always really been, I think, important to me is understanding people's stories. And I thought at the same time, okay, I spent 3 years learning media arts production. I think maybe now I could use it. So at that point, I decided to embark on a little bit of a different thing and, capture the stories of these producers and try to tell them. Because for us, we're in the industry, we are able to speak directly with producers and understand their story. But for the general masses, it can be very hard to distinguish between why this duck is better than this duck, why this duck is more expensive than this duck. So I guess I really wanted just to be able to give these incredible producers a bit of a position to tell their story and allow people just to understand what they go through to get such incredible produce on the plate. So I was lucky to have met an incredible producer by the name of Luke Winder. So he produces the Maremma free range ducks, an absolutely outstanding product. And his philosophy and his farming method is a regenerative style of farming. And at that time, it's something that really caught my eye because it was quite unique. But more importantly, what he was producing literally regenerated the earth. And I thought that in itself was a very powerful story to tell. So, I spent some time with him and his family on the farm to understand what they do and how they do it, and tried to really identify what it was about their method that allowed them to shine against the rest. Again, regenerative farming is such an important and incredible farming method that a lot of farmers nowadays are adopting that style. But I think he's probably one of the first, if not the first, in the country to really kind of showcase that and allow, I guess, a restaurant to really celebrate that. So at that time, 2018, 2019, he featured his ducks on Key and Bennelong, and still to this day, they champion his ducks because they are incredible. They're an incredible product. Fully free range, pasture raised, chemical free. Essentially what you would want to eat and allow the benefits of the produce to actually be present because they're so nutrient dense. Idyllic story, you think of a happy farm, and then his farm comes to mind. So that's how I started a game farm. Off the back of that video, Game Farm distributes Luke's ducks, the Marima free range ducks. And so I think, at that time they would have potentially seen the video and understood my background. I never really kind of had an aspiration to get back into the food service world. I think at that point I kind of really just wanted to do what I wanted to do and potentially start the food truck. And so, I had a meeting with Scott Evans, who's the CEO of Game Farm, and Daniel Gelati, who's the national sales manager, just wanting to understand what I was up to, what I had planned, and what they could potentially offer me in terms of a role. So I think, things kind of happen for a reason, and I often wonder if I hadn't have done that video, if I would be here. You never really know, right?
Right. And what's your main role here now?
My main role here is, essentially, I'm a business development manager, but that kind of encompasses, a whole different array of things, primarily because Game Farm is a very small boutique business, which is often something that it's not perceived as. And that's something that I definitely learnt throughout my time. I thought Game Farm was a big business that produced, poultry, spatchcock, quails. But having learnt about program and honestly just about the family, it is absolutely a family business. I think when I had that initial meeting with Daniel and Scott, I understood that I could have a place there and I could bring value to the business. So I'm lucky enough where I still am able to speak to chefs, speak to restaurants, still go about that method of planning menus and, providing them with produce. But I'm also, I think, quite a part of the business now in terms of what it looks like from an operations perspective, what it looks like from, a marketing perspective, just kind of taking on different roles and just being, quite heavily present within the business.
What's the most challenging thing working here?
I think one of the challenging things is, from a whole perspective, is just staffing and the ability to find enough staff. Obviously, we're a pretty small business, so pickers, packers, it's hard to find people sometimes, and understandably, working in an environment that's a fridge is not fun.
Right.
So it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of grit. And I've got a lot of time for our pick packers and understand exactly what they go through. Super appreciative of what they do. So I think sometimes it's challenging to be able to deal with the fact that you may not be able to supply something. And obviously our role here is to be able to get our product from point A to point B. And if it doesn't happen, that's obviously quite a challenging thing to endure. Because you got to figure out a way. You have to explain to the end user what's happened. So I think the process in itself can be challenging, but at the same time, incredibly rewarding because you can learn from them. And I'm a big believer in understanding that if you do the same thing over and over again, you'll get the same result. So if you try something different, chances are you'll get a different result. It may not be a desired result, but it's a result that, you may never have to revisit again because you've done it. So I think, that's probably the most challenging thing. It's maybe a bit of a general thing because it's it's an industry thing. But as a business, it's an incredible business. And for me, being part of the business is something where I feel like I'm actually contributing to the overall success of the business, which is an incredibly rewarding thing. And I've just been able to kind of steer the direction of the things that I want to do and have a voice in things that, are quite senior level oriented. But yes, very, very good business to be part of.
We're living in the world where we can't even imagine what's going to happen next month. But where do you see yourself in 10 years?
10 years, Kevy. That's a long time away. I've had moments where I've asked this of myself. And I guess a lot of the time, if someone asks you that, the immediate response is, I want to be successful. In 10 years, I want to be successful, which is fine. But then I guess I kind of wanted to define what successful was. For some people, success is driven by the cars they drive, the houses they have, the money they make effectively, which is fair. That's kind of what we're taught to believe is success, right?
Yeah.
But for me, I don't think that necessarily is what my version of success is. So I think in 10 years, as you know, Kevy, my partner and I, we have been in a long-distance relationship for 5 years. So I think for me, success looks like something of, I guess, me living a life with her. Because after the 5-year period now, I'm very, very happy at the fact that she's moving to Australia in October. And I think for me, success looks more so as something where I want to invest in a life with her and kind of allow us to create a world, potentially for our kids one day, that's just full of, I guess, love and safety. And I guess for me, success is more so driven on the fact that I want to raise people in this world that will do good things instead of, necessarily thinking about the things that I could have. So I guess in 10 years, hopefully, I will by that point have lived another 10 years with my incredible partner, and maybe one day, maybe at that point, have 1 or 2 kids and bring them up in a world that is full of food.
That's awesome. Do you have a guilty pleasure?
Yes, ice cream.
Ice cream. Which one?
You could give me ice cream and I'll eat it all.
Anything.
So I think, I don't know what it is about it, but I just find so much satisfaction in eating. I actually have this incredible memory of when I would have been actually straight out of high school, would have been about 18, 19. And my sister at that time was living abroad doing international studies. That was in Bordeaux in France. And so I went over to spend some time with her and obviously see Europe. And I have this incredible memory of me being in Venice, eating gelato, right, like looking over the canals, not just like a scoop, it was like a 1.5 litre tub, and I smashed the whole thing. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. Something about ice cream for me is the most satisfying thing.
What's your favourite ice cream?
That's a very tough question to answer. I think you can't really go past a very good pistachio gelato and a very good hazelnut gelato. For me, if an ice cream or a gelato shop does good versions of them, that's my kind of indication that they know what they're doing.
Do you have a specific spot?
Honestly, if we want to talk guilty pleasures,
Bring it on.
I'm going straight to connoisseur, salted caramel, and hazelnut. Right. I'm every day of the week. You give me a tub of that, you won't see it ever again. It's done. Forget it. That's me.
Oh, that's great. I asked this question to Paul Lee from Diggy Doos, and I think I kind of liked it. This weekend, you can be anywhere in the world, and then I'll pay for anything, and then I will make it happen to secure the booking or anything you need. Where would you be on Saturday, 5 p.m?
That's a very easy question to answer, Kevy.
Yeah.
It would be with my partner, Lucia, at her home in Naples. Yeah, that's easy. Every day of the week.
Great. We touched base your 10 years later. Let's talk about 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, what were you doing? And any advice would you give to younger talents who are at that stage or who are thinking to go into hospitality industry?
It's funny that you asked that question because literally 10 years ago was when I kind of sparked the desire to enter hospo. So that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to work at Victor Churchill, literally 10 years ago. So I guess the biggest things that I've learnt over the last 10 years, and if I could potentially have a conversation with myself back then, I'd probably say continue to do what you love. Allow that to be able to dictate what you do. Don't rush. Learn. More importantly, invest in yourself, because that's probably the best way that you'll advance in life. Because if you're 17, 18, or even if you're 21, 22, and you're just heavily aspiring towards making all the cash monies, that's fine. You know, you go through that period where, yeah, I want to have a nice car, I'm going to buy all the amazing clothes that I can get. I think for me, I would probably tell myself that stuff doesn't really matter. Understand that you need to really lean into the things that make you happy, because they're going to make you money at the end of the day. So really lean into that stuff. Don't necessarily allow yourself to be conscious of what other people think, because nobody's going to walk in your shoes but you, right? So ultimately, I would probably tell myself, and I think I've always kind of been this way, is do what you love and don't allow other people to tell you otherwise. But yeah, I'd probably say take your time, understand, invest in yourself, and just be appreciative of the things that you have. Because ultimately, you're going to be successful in life if you're happy. And that kind of has to start with understanding that happiness comes from literally you wanting to do what you want to do and not being told otherwise. So I'd probably, I'd have a lot of things to say to Tim of 10 years ago, but at the same time, I probably wouldn't change anything. Because I'm in that position where, I'm in that position now where I don't think if I had done anything different, I probably wouldn't be in this position now. And again, you'd never really know, would you?
That's so great. You said don't rush. Did you rush anything?
Not necessarily that I rushed things, but I think I was more so in a mindset where if you don't do it, you're never going to do it. So you just do it now, do it straight away, which is fine. But I think what I've come to learn is that the process is the success. You know what I mean? It's not when you get to the destination. It's the stuff that happens in between. Because that teaches your character, it develops your character, and it allows you to get from the next step, or from the step to the next step. So I think understanding that, time is probably our most precious resource, and using it in a more efficient and a smart way, and just allocating it properly.
All right, I think it's time to wrap up the show. Thank you again for your time, and a couple of quails as well we had.
We got there in the end?
Yes. Yes. All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys for the next episode. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Kev. Thanks for having me on. It's great to see you doing this. It's great to see you doing what you love. Wishing you all the success with it, and I can't wait to listen to all the incredible guests that you have coming up.
Thank you.